Kia ora and hello, friends. Welcome back to the Restoring Connections podcast. I am Matthew Dawson, and it is a joy and a privilege to have you listening in. Thank you. I hope that you find this stuff helpful. We are, as per normal, we are diving into all manner of topics around the healing and strengthening of your most important relationships, the relationships that you want to go the distance, the ones that you are thinking, yep, I'll be pretty disappointed if I don't take this relationship with me all the way to the end, right? Those are the kind of relationships that we want to strengthen, to be able to get through the tough times, right? Because if we think, oh yeah, I just love this person and we just really enjoy time together, you know? And yeah, that's all we need. If that relationship is going to make it through the tough times, you're going to need more than chemistry, right? Because chemistry is a great way for a relationship to start. I love chemistry, like relationships. You can feel that where it's like, oh man, you just get me, right? And I just get you. And we just think the same kind of stuff and we feel the same kind of way about stuff. I mean, the chemistry between Cora and I, I got to be careful. I shouldn't talk about it too long because it is spicy. It is awesome. Cora and I have such awesome chemistry between us in every kind of way. I mean, we can just sit down and just talk and talk and talk and talk about things, you know? And the truth is that chemistry isn't what has gotten us through some incredibly difficult times. Not at all. Chemistry has, just that, because there are times where we can't just talk and talk and talk and talk. We don't see eye to eye. We don't feel the same way. We don't agree about the situation. And it's in those times, which have happened, do happen, will happen going forward for sure, because we're still on planet Earth where life can be really tough, right? It's in those times that we lean back into, I'm responsible for me, you are responsible for you. I'm going to feed this connection with proactive care, and I'm hoping that you're going to feed the connection with proactive care as well, but that's up to you. I'm going to communicate powerfully with you. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be loving. I'm going to be kind. I'm going to communicate in a way that moves us forward, hoping that you will too, but, that's up to you. And to protect my ability to be kind and loving and patient and gracious and caring, I'm going to make sure that I've got healthy boundaries for myself, hoping that you will as well. But again, that's up to you. Right? So that's what we're diving into. Okay, so this is the second episode in a 4-part series on what if I look like the ... So we're talking about the fear of how we are perceived when we are moving forward in a relationship, where there's something that we are pretty sure we need to do, but we're inhibited. It's because fear is paralyzing, right? Fear is paralyzing. Fear creates paralysis and confusion, which are arguably like the most, well, you've heard me talk about this before if you've been listening to the podcast for a while. Pain is not the ultimate relationship killer. Definitely not, right? There's a lot of good that can come out of pain. In fact, pain is an important part of any close relationship for sure. Confusion, on the other hand, that is the relationship killer. Nothing good comes from confusion. If I'm going through something really painful, but I know exactly why I'm going through it, I know how I got there, I know what's going on, and I know where I'm heading. Right? I have an idea of where I'm heading, and it is very painful right now, but I know exactly, I have clarity, and so I'm not confused. Then actually that pain can actually be an incredibly important part of the relationship and can actually enhance the relationship. I mean, we have that I'm a Jesus following person, and one of the most powerful parts of scripture is when Jesus himself, right, he is in agony and he is on his way to being crucified by the very people that he loved, right? And he is in agony, but he knows exactly why. He knows exactly why he's doing what he's doing. He knows where he's heading. He knows why it needs to be done. He knows who he's doing it for. And his heavenly Father is saying, trust me, we got this. This is what needs to be done. And so, is he in pain? Yes. Is he confused? No. Right? And so this is what we're talking about, and so fear creates confusion. So we want to really make sure that we've got really healthy ways of overcoming fear. Fear is going to be a part of life. It's going to be, you're going to wrestle with fear. I'm going to wrestle with fear, right? You're probably not going to get to the point where that's not a wrestle if you're alive on planet Earth. And so we need to have really good, healthy practices in place for recognizing fear and overcoming fear so that we're not counseled by it. Okay, so the next one we are looking at, the first one we looked at was the fear of being perceived as the bad guy. What if I look like the bad guy? Next one we're looking at is, what if I look like the weak one? And so this is where sometimes, so I'd say if you're wrestling with this, you're probably, we said with the first one, if you're wrestling with the fear of being perceived as the bad guy, you're probably in a process of setting boundaries. Hopefully they're healthy boundaries. But when we're talking about the fear of being perceived as the weak one, maybe you listen to this and you kind of go, oh yeah, that's me. The bad guy thing, you might go, the bad guy thing, yeah, that's not really my thing. I don't think I'm ever going to be perceived as being the bad guy. But this one is like, oh, being perceived as being weak. That's a tough one. And even for me, I would say this is probably more a wrestle for me personally than the first one. I probably gravitate, I gravitate more towards, some situations require the healthy medium would be, right, I'm firm when I need to be firm about something, and I'm gracious when I need to be gracious, and we get that balance right. If I'm going to err on one or the other, I'm probably going to err on the side of passivity. On a bad day, that's more of a struggle for me. I'm probably not going to steamroll or T-Rex somebody. But the biggest issues that I've had in my life have usually come from me not addressing a situation when I really should have, and I let it go on too long. And so because of that, there is maybe some of that precedent. I kind of, I don't want to be perceived as that. Maybe actually, no, that's probably initially it was more, I don't want to be perceived as the bad guy, but then actually, as I'm talking out loud, I'm realizing it's probably equal. It just depends on the situation. So if you're wrestling with this, you're probably extending grace or looking at keeping your mouth closed about something. You're probably feeling like the right thing to do is to extend grace in this situation, or to not speak into the situation, to not do something. And the fear, though, is that I might be perceived as being weak. And so, you feel like the right thing to do is this, but because I'm afraid that I'm going to be perceived as weak, it causes you to curb that behavior in a way that maybe is a bit more harsh or a bit more intense. That's because I don't want to look like I'm weak in this situation, and so I'm gonna bring the hammer down, kind of a thing, because that fear of being perceived as weak is just, maybe it's like an unbearable feeling. It's like, that would just be the worst thing. I couldn't possibly stomach the thought that people perceive me as being weak. Okay, so so the questions are the same as the first episode that we did, pretty much, but we're just going to kind of walk through them a little bit more. Particularly in each of the 4 episodes, I'm hoping that you kind of find yourself in ways, in each of these areas, because I think probably all of us deal with all 4. I think, as I said before, you're going to gravitate more towards one than the others, but I think we can probably all connect with all 4. So the first one, again, who am I accountable to, right? Who, again, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm trying to figure this out all on my own. If I'm trying to figure it out all on my own, see, here's the thing. I happen to know that I didn't create the universe. I happen to know that I'm not God, right? I'm acutely aware of that. And so when my emotions are signaling danger, what if I look like the weak one, right? If I try to wrestle that through inside of myself, I'm probably going to end up getting confused, and there's going to be doubt. And so again, like I talked about in the first episode, my heart is doing its job. It's saying you don't want to be perceived as weak. There's the potential for disconnection coming. If people think that you're weak, then you're going to get disconnected. So again, I'm not saying that is, that's even necessarily healthy, but it's good to dial into that. Your heart is doing what it's supposed to do, right? It's supposed to send that signal, right? There's potential disconnection coming up. So I'm going to lean into getting the help that I need. I'm going to go, hey, I need accountability. I need something outside of myself. I need other people who I trust, who I respect, who I admire, who I can lean into and ask that question. Am I being too passive here? Am I actually am I convincing myself that extending grace, right, and saying it's okay is the right thing to do, but in actual reality, is this unhealthy? I'm 40 years old, and I grew up in California, which means that the Offspring were a big part of my childhood, the band, right? Which probably somewhat true of just about anybody who grew up in LA, at least, and was born in 1983 like me. And it makes me think of that song, Self-Esteem, right? The more you suffer, the more it shows you really care, right? Okay, so we all listen to that. Well, those of you who, like me, are in that same sort of era, we listen to that, and we could, and we know, well, I'm pretty sure he doesn't mean that literally. I am pretty sure he realizes how dysfunctional that is, right? The more I suffer, it's because, is that true? Can suffering show that you care? Absolutely. Oh, 100%. Right? Enduring. I think of my friends who have suffered through a spouse or a child or a parent having an illness, and that is suffering. Like I am limited. I can't do things that I would have loved to have done because I've chosen to suffer through caring for this person. Yes, that can be incredibly caring. Can it also be incredibly dysfunctional? Yes, 100%. If you're in a situation where you really need boundaries, but you can't go there. Like it's the thought of being perceived as the bad guy, or the thought of is just too extreme, and so you can't do it, right? We also recognize that can be incredibly unhealthy. And so the question, who gets to if I'm dressing this up, is if I'm saying, but I think, I just want to extend grace. This person, and I'm saying things like, oh, but they don't know better, and I really can't expect them to, do anything different. They've been through really hard. I need somebody who can look me in the eyes and say, Matt, that's all just fear, bro. That's all just fear, bud. You're just protecting yourself. I know it's dressing itself up. You're dressing it up as care, but all that is actually is just fear. And you obviously, I don't let anybody just sort of speak to my life like that, but there's people in my life who definitely have permission to say that kind of stuff, to speak into my life and submit that kind of perception to me, and saying, hey, this ain't smelling good, Matt. Like, that smells like fear. That smells like fear. And so that question, who am I accountable to? Who gets to tell me when I'm probably off track? Okay, who am I accountable to? So again, I'm dealing with the fear of being perceived as being weak. Number two, whose judgment am I afraid of? Who actually am I afraid is going to be perceiving me as if I'm weak, right? So maybe what's going on here is actually I grew up with a dad who, this isn't the case in my journey, which I'm very grateful for, but I know it's the truth in a lot of people's journey. Maybe I grew up with a dad who created an aura in their home where any kind of weakness, any kind of emotion was perceived as being weak, any kind of extension of grace was perceived as being weak, right? And so there's this inbuilt kind of, I don't want to be perceived as being weak. I need to be the tough guy. I need to be in control. I don't want to appear as being vulnerable. I've got to present myself as being ironclad. I've got to, because, and maybe it's your personality, or maybe you developed that over a period of time. And maybe in the situation you're in right now, it's interesting how this kind of stuff can work. These can be fears that developed by the time you were 5 years old. And if you think, okay, here I am, I'm in this situation. I don't want to be perceived as being weak. And if you really ask yourself the question, whose judgment am I afraid of? Who is likely to judge you? Who is likely to say, oh, Matt's just being weak. Matt's just being passive. Matt just doesn't have the backbone to actually stand up to the situation, right? You might look at the people that are actually in the situation, and you might think, none of these people are actually likely to think that at all. And if you really do some soul searching, some reflecting, you might realize, this is about me and my dad. This is about me and my football coach, from ninth grade. This is about me and my dance tutor. This is about me and my big sister from when I was 4. I don't know what it is, but it may be something that happened way back then, that where someone told you you're weak, you're pathetic, you don't have what it takes. And so that was just anathema to you at that time. It was so unbearable that something galvanized in you that I will never put myself in a position where I am going to be perceived as being weak. I will never make myself vulnerable again. Maybe you took a risk in a romantic relationship where you made yourself vulnerable and then they absolutely crushed you. Maybe you took the risk of, maybe you didn't have a healthy relationship with your mom, and then there was a woman in your life who was older than you, and you took the risk of really trusting them and allowing them to be like a mother to you, which was really scary because you didn't even have a close relationship with your own mom, and you really went there and let your guard down, right? And then they did something that you felt really crushed and disappointed by. Right, and you've carried that, and something inside you galvanized and said, I'll never be the weak one again. I'll never be the vulnerable one again, right? Then you're going to find yourself in a situation where what this relationship needs right in front of you is grace and vulnerability and openness and kindness. But there's going to be something inside you going, no, don't be the weak one. Don't be the weak one, right? And so if you can go through a process of going, okay, whose judgment exactly am I afraid of? Who is it sitting on my shoulder? I'm sorry, Tina and Fred. I don't know why. Let's mix it up. Sally. It's about Sally this time, right? It's like, oh, flip. Let's name it. Instead of just having this fog of, I'm afraid of just like the universe judging me for being weak, I'm dialing in, and Sally is the one who I'm afraid of, right? Maybe it isn't a situation from your past. Maybe it's a situation right in your present. Like, yeah, I know exactly whose judgment I'm afraid of, because if I do this, if I extend grace, or maybe it's your own spouse or something, if I do this, if I extend grace, if I don't deal with this situation harshly, I know what Sally's going to say. Sally's going to write me an email and go, typical. you know, or get up in my face and say, I knew you didn't have the backbone to deal with that. Maybe you know exactly who's judged. If you can name it and say, yeah, this is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of Sally. Well, then you can, again, just like the doctor thing, the more specific you are about the sickness you're dealing with, the more you can go, okay, right. Well, maybe Sally is going to judge you for that. What are you going to do about it, right? And then the next question, of course, is what do I believe about me? Am I weak? Maybe I believe that about myself. Maybe nobody else is thinking that at all around me, but maybe I'm just actually wrestling with myself, right? And so my question, like in the last episode, somebody said, I don't want to appear to be weak. And I go, okay, well, are you weak? And they look at me like, I don't know. I'm looking for the world around me to tell me whether or not I'm weak. And I say, that's your problem right there. That's your issue, is that you either believe that you are weak and pathetic, or you believe that you might be weak and pathetic. And that's what we've actually got to wrestle with here. We've got to wrestle with what you believe about yourself. We got to get to the bottom of, when did you start believing that you're weak? Or when did you start believing that you might be weak? When did you lose your confidence that you have what it takes to grab life by the proverbials? When did you lose that? You know, when did that start? Where did you lose your sense of like personal strength and the ability to choose a path? When did you lose that? When was that? What situation did you go through that crushed that in you? Right? Maybe it was with a parent, or maybe you had a parent that, you know, anytime you started crying, said, stop that crying right now. And really what was going on and what you need to hear. And if that's you, I want to say this to you right now, right? That if that's what you've experienced, that probably had a lot more to do with where that authority figure was at in their own journey. If they didn't have the capacity to create a safe place for you to feel what you were feeling, that says more about them than it does about you. I'm not saying let's judge them and throw them under the bus at all, but I'm saying, friend, if you were a child and you needed the ability to cry about a situation, you were not asking too much. Right? And maybe you need to maybe there's something inside of you that's gone, I've wrestled with any form of weakness. If I extended vulnerability in any way, it immediately created disconnection. If I cried, it produced disconnection. If I was honest about what I feel about something, it created disconnection. And so now you've shut that down, right? And you've vowed to yourself, I'll never be vulnerable, I'll never show weakness. So what do you believe about yourself? Are you weak? When did you start believing of that? Are you afraid? What are you afraid of? And again, if you need to, and you probably do, get some help. Don't try to wrestle with these things on your own. Get the help that you need. Next up, what do I believe about the situation? What is important to me in this situation, right? Why do I want to extend grace? Why do I want to not actually wrestle with this? Right? Well, maybe what's really important to me in this situation is actually I'm fighting for peace. Maybe I'm actually fighting for the morale of like the good vibes in this team. There's something inside you's gotta land. Why do I want to extend grace? What's actually important to me? What do I believe about this situation? Why do I want to keep my mouth closed? Again, you might want to get some help. You might need somebody who can draw that clarity out of you. Because if the truth is, the only reason I don't want to deal with this situation is I'm afraid of what might happen, or maybe, right? I'm dealing with this situation harshly because I'm afraid of how I might be perceived in the situation. Again, get help, get some clarity. What do you believe about the situation? Okay. Next question, there's two more. What do I care? Oh, sorry. Do I care enough about this person and these people to confront them when that is what love requires? Do I actually care enough? Am I actually too weak for that? And you've got to ask that question. If you've gone through a situation where it's been a year, it's been 2 years. Like, when was the last time you've got a tough conversation you need to have with somebody? And you go, oh, I just feel like it's time to extend grace. I just, but I don't know. I don't want to be perceived as being weak. Well, the question is, have you ever confronted this person before? If the answer is no, if you've known this person for a while and you've never had a confrontation at all, yeah, Houston, we have a problem. That's probably a warning sign. That's probably a warning that, that we need to develop some courage here. Right? So when was the last time? You want some confidence that, yeah, I know when confrontation is necessary, we can definitely, we can and we will deal with things as they come up. Or is the reality, it's like, you know what? I don't have a healthy view of this situation, because no matter what happens, I'm always going to default back to it's time to extend grace. And the reality is, that's just because I'm way too afraid to actually confront this person. I'm way too afraid to actually confront this situation. So why am I extending grace? Do I care enough about this person or these people to confront them when that's what love requires, right? And you might say, oh, of course I do. Of course I do. Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, when was the last time you did that? Well, several weeks ago, there was a situation where, the mugs were left in the kitchenette oh, okay. And you knew who had done it? Yes, I knew who had done it. And so you talked to them. Well, I didn't talk to them personally, but I kind of made an announcement to the team. And I'm like, no. That's not good enough. That's not dealing with a relationship. That's not dealing with the situation. You've got to know that when things come up, as they will, if you want this relationship to be healthy, friend, if you want that relationship to be healthy, you're going to have to pick the weeds. If you want your garden to be healthy, unless you've got some kind of, I don't know what kind of soil you've got, if you don't have weeds. I mean, our soil, I live in the Bay of Plenty. That's literally the name of the region of Aotearoa, New Zealand, that we live in, and the soil here rocks. Let me tell you, we do a lot of weeding. That's just how it is, and relationships are like that. It's gonna take weeding. There's things that are gonna happen that need to be dealt with. So do you care enough about this person or these people to confront them when that's what love requires? And again, just like the last episode, the next question is, do I care enough about this person? I just said that. What kind of people do I want to build deep connection with? What do I expect from people who care about me when they perceive that I'm just being a pushover, right? Have I built a group of people around me, a group of friends around me who I feel confident that if I'm actually just being a pushover, they're going to let me know. They're going to talk to me. They're going to say, hey, Matt, are you sure? Are you running away from this? Right? And I'm so grateful to be married to Cora. Because, if there's one thing, that wouldn't be true. There's a lot of things I love about Cora. One of the things I enjoy so much about her is that she is so not afraid of a tough conversation. Oh my gosh. I just think that is so incredibly awesome and sexy and beautiful and wonderful. I just absolutely love that about Cora. She's not afraid of a tough conversation, right? She is, she's probably learned from me that it's not always time for a tough conversation. Yes, that conversation needs to happen, but maybe we just hero sandwich it a little bit. Maybe we just, create some good vibes around it, put some bubble wrap around it, and there's a strength in that as well, right? And she's learned that from me, and she would definitely say that. But I love that she is not afraid of a tough conversation. So I went out and married somebody who I know will do this. If she smells weakness, if she smells like, you know, that smells like fear, right? And I kind of go, oh, I'm just dealing with this situation in this way. And she goes, and she can kind of, something doesn't smell quite right. She does it humbly. She does it beautifully. She doesn't do it harshly, right? But she has the courage to say, I know that I've surrounded myself with someone, literally share a bedroom with someone who will provide this accountability in my life. And I would really encourage you, whether that's your spouse or a friend or somebody, like you want to be thinking to yourself, because if you're afraid about being perceived in a particular way, you need to be able to lean back in knowing that, yeah, I think I'm okay here because I know I've surrounded myself with people who will be honest with me if I'm doing that old thing again, right? The people are going to speak the truth to me in love. And so I can lean back into that, and that can give me confidence and peace about the situation. All right, friend, that was the second episode in this 4-part series. I hope you found that helpful, and we will see you in the next one.
We hope you found the conversation and stories on today's podcast helpful and insightful. If you want to go deeper, Restoring Connections offers online courses that cover key topics like personal responsibility, proactive care, powerful communication, and healthy boundaries. Go to www.restoringconnections.nz for more information. This podcast is funded by generous supporters from all over the world. Please consider supporting by going to the Restoring Connections website and hitting the Contribute button. By partnering with us, you're helping to provide mentoring, workshops, and training to others who are also restoring their connections.